Welcome to Inspired to Serve, where we dive deep into the public safety issues that challenge us, inspire us, and remind us of the resilience of the human spirit. I'm Melesa Johnson, candidate for Jackson County Prosecutor, and today we have conversations that touch on one of the most devastating experiences a parent can endure: the loss of a child to homicide. In April, three children were either murdered or injured within a 2 week span. In this episode, we'll be hearing from courageous parents who have faced unimaginable tragedy and found the strength to navigate complex journeys of grief, navigating the legal process, and turning their pain into advocacy. Their stories are raw, honest, and deeply moving, offering a glimpse into the profound impact of violence on families and communities, and highlighting the importance of aggressively prosecuting violent offenders, victim advocacy, and providing resources. So join me as we listen with open hearts and minds to the voices of these remarkable parents who are committed to honoring the life and memories of their precious children. This is a conversation that may be difficult to hear at times, but it is one that sheds light on the importance of our relentless crusade for a world where we all can grow old. Without further ado, let's dive into this poignant and powerful conversation. I also want to note that many of our interviewees are representatives of 501c3 organizations. And I want to be clear that they are participating in these interviews in their individual capacity, and nothing should be construed as an official endorsement on behalf of their respective organizations. Thank you. Hello, neighbors of Jackson County. I am here with two amazing community pillars that have such a pivotal story to share with all of us today. We have Bob and Michelle Norris. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
Absolutely, absolutely. And so, of course, we are here to talk about a variety of things, but first and foremost, your son Corey. Your son Corey. Can you tell us a little bit about Corey, his personality, his light, and what he brought to this world?
Corey was 22, and he was married, but at the time he and his wife were living separately. He didn't have any children or anything else. He was going to college at the time and working at a Jimmy John's, and he was a very altruistic kind of a guy, very quiet. He'd had a learning disability his entire life, so he went to special education, that kind of stuff. But as he got older, the way that he expressed himself was through kindness. So, for example, one day I came home and on they the kids had to go to Milwaukee. He and his sibling had to go to Milwaukee. So when I came home, I went on my back porch, and on my back porch there's this huge heart, and it says, "Dear Mom, I love you, I miss you, and I'll see you soon. Love, Corey." And after he passed, I did get that tattoo right here. And then on top of that, for example, another example, my older sister, she has 6 kids. So when she had these 6 kids, it was hard sometimes financially for her. So one day she called me and she was crying, and she said, "I am not going to be able to afford to pay for a whole bunch of different Christmas gifts. I feel like I'm failing my kids." She said, "I don't know that I even have enough money for Christmas dinner." And Corey had listened to the whole thing, and I hung up, and he goes, "You know, Mom, I've got some money." And I said, "Yeah, I've got a little bit of money too." And he said, "I have an idea." And I said, "Okay." And when he got off work that night, he and I went over to Walmart, and we got 6 gift cards. And then we got Christmas cards that went along with them. And then we got a gift card for Price Chopper. And we brought all of those home, and we printed all the labels on them and etc. Didn't have any of our handwriting, so they couldn't tell who it was from or anything else. And he and I put on each one of them, "Dear James,
Right.
you are responsible for getting your brother this gift," and gave every single one of the kids a gift so that they could be Secret Santa to another person. And then we put all of them together into a big envelope. And he and I drove from our house in Independence to their house in Blue Springs. And he made me wait until after midnight, because he didn't want to get busted. We get to the house, and he says, go around the block. So I had to go around the block 3 times before he was really convinced that his Aunt Kathy was not going to be able to see him. And we parked a block about 2 houses away, and he starts going over to the house like he's Pink Panther, hiding behind poles and scrunching down behind cars and crawling along the street. And he's got this envelope in his hand. And he finally gets over there, and he opens up the mailbox and it screeches. And he goes, oh! And he shoves the envelope in there, slams it shut, runs back to the car, gets in, and he goes down into the floorboard of my Corolla. He's hiding in the floorboard, and he's, go, 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 Mom, I think she heard me. The next day, my sister called. Shelley, you're not going to believe what happened. And I said, what's that? She said, somebody left this, and she described everything I just told you in my mailbox, and I have no clue who it is. And she said, but here's the thing, one of the kids needs somebody to go shopping with them because they're too small to do it on their own. Would you be willing to go with them? And I said, absolutely. Corey listened to the whole thing, and I look over at him, and Corey's crying. And Kathy didn't know that it was Corey until the day he died. And I held her and I said, Kathy, I have something I have to tell you. She said, what? I said, you remember the Christmas gift cards? And she goes, yeah. I said, that was Corey. And she,
selfless kindness.
yeah, the idea of altruism, of giving because it's the right thing to do.
So understanding how he's still pouring into you. Talk to me about the day that you unfortunately lost him, and lost him in physical presence, right? Because his spirit is still with us. I believe it was 2013.
Yes, it was July 26th that I saw him last. We were talking. He was upset about something that happened at work, so he kind of talked to me for a few minutes about that. And then I remember that for some reason I showed him a video of Simple Man, which is a song about, all I want you to be is a simple man. And showed him that, and we talked for a minute, and he said, look, I've got some Taco Bell, I'm going to go upstairs, I'm going to eat it, and I'll see you later. And Bob and I went out to dinner. And that night we came back, and his car was gone, which was not abnormal, because he was 22, and, he had a car. So you have a job, you have a car, you're doing your stuff, go ahead, do what you need to do. Then Bob and I were planning to go out of town. We were going to go to Omaha. And we went to bed about 9. Corey's younger sibling, Jake, said that they went outside and the car was back about 10:30. So they assumed that they were somewhere there in the neighborhood, or that Corey was somewhere in the neighborhood. And then about 2:30 in the morning, I heard a pounding on my bedroom door. And Jake said, Mom, I need you to come upstairs. Corey's got a hole in the side of his neck. It's not bleeding, but he can't speak, and I think it might be life-threatening. So I ran upstairs, and Jake called 911 and directed the EMTs and all that other stuff. And as I walked into the main bedroom, he came out of the ensuite, and he was holding his stomach, and he was leaning forward, and his face looked like he was trying to scream. And as he was doing this, I said, Corey, you need to come here. And he turned and looked at me, and he walked toward me, and then he fell down, and I fell down next to him. He fell into my arms, and his eyes rolled back in his head, and he kept breathing. And I said, Corey, you have to breathe. And he always did what I told him to do. And he went like that. And when he did that, I noticed that there was a stab wound across his stomach as well.
Wow.
He had about a nickel-sized hole in the side of his neck. I could actually see the vein pumping, trying to get the blood to go through his body. We didn't know it, but he'd already lost 2.5 liters of blood into his abdomen, which is why he couldn't speak. Because once you've lost that much blood, it's impossible. They ended up having to revive him on the way to the hospital. They revived him in the ER.
Wow.
They did surgery on him, found out, oh, this cut didn't just come from the front, it came from the back. So there's both sides of his liver needed to be repaired. When they got him up to the ICU, then they also had to revive him. He was a code blue. And then we thought that he was going to make it. The nurse said, you know what, if you want to go home and take a shower or whatever, because I'd been there because by this time it's July 28th. I had blood on me. I needed to go take a shower. Bob needed to go get Corey's youngest sibling, Everest. And it was just, we needed to get some things done. And they assured us that Corey was going to live. And I got back to the hospital, and the nurse said, there's been a neurological change. And I said, what does that mean? And he said, that means that we need to check to see if Corey's brain is still active. And come to find out, he'd had a stroke, and he died while I was at home taking a shower. It took everything in my will to say, okay, he's brain dead, and to accept the fact that even though I know that his heart is pumping because of the machines, and I know that everything else is functioning because he's on all of these different machines, he's breathing, etc., his brain is not alive. So part of that accepting was honoring his altruism and saying, we want to donate everything we can. So Corey saved 5 lives. He gave sight to 2 people. He gave tissue. He gave blood. He gave veins. He gave marrow. He gave bone. There's more PVC in Corey's casket than there is Corey. I had a conversation with Jake, about a month later, and I said, because we made such an effort to keep Corey alive, there are 5 other people that are living now because of Corey's donation, and there are 5 families that are not grieving because their loved one received a heart or a liver, a kidney and a pancreas, whatever it might be.
Even to have the resolve and the perspective in such a heavy and unimaginable moment, I mean, I think is a testament to the type of people that both of you all are. But the reality is, you were put in that position to make those decisions because of the acts of somebody else.
Exactly.
And so when you lose a child to homicide, or when you lose a child to any means, you're not just able to grieve. Right. You also have to navigate the legal process and prosecution. And so talk to me about how you were able to navigate that and any supports you wish you had during that time.
When Corey died, I'd been in social work for over 25 years already. So I had worked with Jackson County Family Courts. I ran Hilltop, believe it or not. I had worked for Missouri Department of Corrections. I'd run 2 shelters for abused and battered women. So I knew about advocates. I knew about crime victims compensation. I knew about the media. I knew about a police investigation. I'd investigated sexual abuse. So all of those things, I already had that background. So when I walked out after I found out Corey had died, I turned to the detective who happened to be there at that time and said, where's my victim's advocate? And they said, we're sorry, but you're not going to get one until this case is solved. And at that moment, I thought, I've never been able to tell any of my clients that you're not going to get help.
Right.
You're not going to get help. And it was compounded by the fact that they did not want to listen, the detective did not want to listen to the family that said the person who killed Corey is named Cody. And they said, well, Cody's not enough to go on. So instead, they focused on Jake, Corey's younger sibling by a year and 3 weeks, his best friend from the time they were born. They were inseparable. And it was very disheartening because I was one of the good guys.
You were. I mean, you worked. You just named all of the institutions within the public safety apparatus that you've poured yourself into, because being a social worker is not easy.
No.
Especially at Hilltop when you're dealing with young people. For those that might not know, that is the juvenile detention center, right?
Right.
Family court, not an easy environment to work in.
No. It's nothing that I have done in my career has ever been the easy way. And in fact, I was talking to Jake about that earlier today. Nothing that I've ever done was easy because I've always believed in doing the right thing because that's the right thing to do, period. And I always thought that everyone had that same mindset. To me, it was confusing when I came out. It was confusing to me that someone else would have a totally different view of it.
Right.
That they would say, well, more than likely his sibling Jake is the one who killed him. And I kept saying, no, it's a guy named Cody. So then Corey's wife, who knew Cody, found out Cody's full name, John Dakota Seeger, found out that he had 3 Facebook pages, got his phone number, messaged him on Facebook, got his phone number, talked to him, took him to lunch at Independence Center, found out his address, his work, everything. And he left a jacket that appeared to have blood on it in her vehicle. They did not accept that as any evidence because she had handled it. They would not even look at it. They would not check it for DNA. They wouldn't do anything. But he left the jacket in her car. Then they said, I'm sorry, but your statement that he was the one who killed him is not enough for us to go on.
Even with the pieces of physical, because the standard is proof beyond a reasonable doubt, not proof beyond all doubt. Exactly. So even though there might have been some breaks in the chain of custody, still in the aggregate, that seems to be enough to at least head down that direction of Cody did it.
Possibly, yeah. The other part too, and I didn't mention this, but there was also some other mishandling of evidence that really frustrated us. The hospital was allowed to throw Corey's clothes away, so there was no evidence. There was no chain of evidence in the hospital where the evidence went from one person to the detective so that they could get DNA evidence. And actually, two nurses from the ICU went in and actually found the evidence in the biohazard and brought it out to the police department and gave it to them. The other part is because Corey died at home and he was actually attacked 2 blocks away at an apartment complex at a picnic table. They couldn't find the crime scene.
Right.
And what they wanted to do was say that the crime scene had to have happened at home. There was not a spot of blood, except for there was one handprint on our back door and a thumbprint on our back gate where he walked through. And they said that wasn't enough for them to believe that he'd come from outside. And why did he come through the back door instead of the front door? Well, the back door was unlocked. Do you always leave the back door unlocked? Yeah, I've never had to feel like my neighborhood was unsafe. And they leave the back door unlocked because it's better than walking in through the front door and making a whole bunch of noise. And the thing is they're questioning the motives for him going through the back door, which is the easiest course, okay? They question this, but they still had to open up the back door for the EMTs to take him out of the house. So logically, wouldn't it have been the same if he was trying to get into the house? Would you want to go 12 steps up or 3 steps up?
Exactly.
Would you rather do a sliding glass door or try to go and unlock the front door?
Exactly. So it sounds like you were not only fighting grief, fighting sorrow, you are also fighting for the truth.
I understand that most homicides happen within a family.
Mm-hmm.
I understand that. And I understand that people are going to point the finger and say, this person over here did it, or this person over here did it, to get the blame off of the family member. But the problem is that they didn't even look at John Dakota Seeger for 3.5 years. The other part of it is that with all the evidence being put to the side, because they didn't even look for any other crime scene, when they couldn't find the knife. John Dakota Seeger said that when he ran away, he threw the knife into the wooded area right next to where Corey was attacked. If they had scoured that, they would have found the knife. And if they'd have found the knife, they'd have had DNA evidence that it was John Dakota Seeger and not Jake. Okay? With all that being said, John Dakota Seeger, whom I normally refer to as just JDS, so from here on, that's how I'm going to refer to him as. JDS was arrested 8 times between the time he killed my son and the time they asked him, did you kill him? And he said, yes, I did. And during that period of time, he was allowed to break into an elderly man's home, tear the colostomy bag off his leg, and wipe manure all over the walls. For that, he got probation and a vandalism charge.
He could have killed him.
Exactly. The next one that he had, he stole a vehicle, he drove it around the inside of a dealership and did $40,000 worth of damage. For that, he got probation and vandalism. The next one, he hit a woman hard enough that he ejected her from her van onto his car, and then he drove off. He could have killed her. For that, he got a 180-day drug rehab and was out on parole from that when he was picked up in a high-speed pursuit, stolen vehicle, felon in possession of a sawed-off shotgun. That was the time that they decided, hey, you know what we should do? We should ask him, did you kill Corey?
He said yes.
And he said yes. The first time they asked him, Melesa, if they had asked him 3.5 years earlier, there would have been 8 less victims in our community.
And quicker closure for you all.
And then on top of that, why in the world was he prosecuted for vandalism and put out on probation when you know that there's this many mugshots of this young man? And if you look at the mugshots, he goes from a healthy-looking man to a very meth-looking kind of a guy. I'm sorry to say it that way, but he's got the bumps and the scrapes and he just looks ill. He looks very ill, and it's because he was using that during that period of time. And so he got sicker and sicker and sicker and sicker. And we could have had that young man off the street within weeks, if not days, of Corey being killed, if they had just done something about it.
Whew, that's a lot.
It is.
That's a lot. That's a lot to unpack because it highlights so many junctures in the road where the system had failed. The system had failed. And so I want to get to the part of that journey where we are in the prosecution phase. And did he go to trial or did he plead guilty?
It was a plea deal. Mm-hmm. And it was one of the prosecutors that was out in Independence at the time. And he's no longer with the prosecution, but he said, because all they have is his confession. They don't have the weapon. They don't have the DNA. They don't have an eyewitness. An entire apartment complex heard my son scream, but not one of them looked out the door. Not one of them looked out the window. So you're telling me now anybody knows, but the entire building right next to where it happened was empty because they all moved within a month. Okay, they all were like, oh, no, we're out of here. But The only evidence we had was this young man saying, "Yes, I did it." But because they were afraid he was going to claim self-defense, even though the knife wound came from the back.
Right.
Okay.
Right. Remember that fact. Remember that fact.
And there's a knife wound here and knife wound from the back. That means that he had enough time to stab my son 2 times.
Right.
If it was self-defense, you would only have to do it 1 time and run.
To preserve your safety and then retreat. Right. To preserve your safety and then retreat.
Not to stab him.
And so were you consulted in the development? It does sound like you were consulted in the development of the plea deal. And probably as it pertains to the sentence that was ultimately sought as well. Were you satisfied?
No. The thing is this, the way that the prosecution brought it to us, it was that we're going to plead him out for 9 years.
No, first they said 5.
Yeah, the first time it said 5 years. Then they said 7 years. And I said no. And they said, okay, let's do 9. We're willing to do 9. And then the prosecutor said, let's not push any further because we probably won't get it. And I said, okay. And he said, my fear is that there's going to be some jurist in the back of the room that is going to vote that he didn't do it.
Was that a risk that you were willing to take?
I would have been willing to take it, I think. Mm-hmm. Because at that point, we'd already gone through
absolutely
the worst.
Yeah, we were already
absolutely
in the middle of it all.
Yeah. So when they tell me 9 years, though, Melesa, I believe it's going to be 9 years. I believe that there's going to be truth in sentencing. Okay? And the problem is Missouri law says that after 2/3, he no longer has to be in jail. So that means instead of 9 years, we really agreed to 6, which is not much better than the 5 we originally talked about. Do I get a year back with Corey?
Right, exactly.
Do I? Because to me, and really the way that we feel is not that there's justice, nothing against the system. I mean, I've worked for it and I work toward it all the time. We don't believe in justice. We believe in answers and validation at this point. And the reason why is because really in the system, you're lucky if you get the answers as to who did it, and you get the validation of, yes, you have a right to be angry, and we're going to give this person some form of a sentence. And that validates that there was at least Corey lived. That at least shows Corey lived and was a person who was important enough that this guy had to go to jail for. The sad thing is, remember I said he got picked up with a sawed-off shotgun?
Yes.
He is now out of prison for Corey, but he's now in the federal prison for the sawed-off shotgun. He's got more time for being a felon in possession than he did for killing a young man.
Than taking your baby's life.
It's been hell.
So heartbreaking to me to hear everything that you've been through, not even feeling like justice exists or that it's possible. Y'all, we have to make some changes. We have to make some changes. And speaking of changes, I would love to talk about the changes that you all both continue to make in our community on behalf of and in the spirit of Corey. Can you talk to us a bit about Corey's network and just kind of how you've turned your pain into power?
Absolutely.
10 years later,
we have helped pay for over 400 funerals. We've helped over 600 families through the process. We've identified over 700 unsolved homicides since 1970, one of which Bob went to high school with. Okay. We've also put over $100,000 back into our community. Okay. And we've done this, 99% of it out of our own home. We have a board of directors that, helped us, and they still continue to help us. But within less than a year, Corey's network was on the ground and ready to go.
When you had every right to just retreat from the world, to just pack up and say, this is too much, because what you experienced was too much. But yet, advocacy, and not just direct service deployment, but you're also making moves in the lawmaking space as well. Yep. So please talk to me a little bit about Corey's Law.
Corey's law was based off the fact that number one, Corey's clothes were thrown away at the hospital, and number two, the state of Missouri has it written in their law that the nurse or medical professionals can ignore HIPAA in two cases: if there's a dog bite or a gunshot wound. But if it is a knife wound, they cannot report it to the police.
Wow.
Because it would be against HIPAA law. So because of that, two parts to this law. Number one, it would make it so that it was legal for a nurse to be able to call if it is a knife wound. Because part of the problem is if he hadn't died in my arms the first time, Corey's case would not have been even brought to the police department because he would have died at the hospital. And they wouldn't have known how to get a hold of me or anything else because they wouldn't have been able to break the law. They wouldn't have been able to call the police. They wouldn't have been able to do anything because it was a knife wound. So the other part, so it would make it so that they would have to be able to call, just like if it was a dog bite or a gunshot wound. The second part of it is that there would be a forensic nurse, just like in a rape, a forensic nurse in any violent crime. They would be able to take and collect the clothing and put it into an evidence bag. Then they would be able to lock it. They would be required to lock it behind a closed door of some type, whether it's a chest or it's a locker, whatever it is. They would have to store it in the place, and then the police would have to sign stating that they received it or that they can go ahead and throw it away. So all of those things would be taken into account, and that bill is currently on the floor with the Missouri House of Representatives. So it's a wonderful bill. It's currently being championed by Mark Sharp, and wonderful guy. It was originally written by Rory Rowland, who passed the baton to Mark, and Mark's taken up the charge. So yes, we're really looking forward to having that bill passed. Yeah.
Now Mayor Rory Rowland of Independence. Yeah. And so you all reach out to Representative Mark Sharp, show your support, make sure that he knows that he has champions behind him as he continues to advocate in support of this law. So last question, because I know you all are very busy saving lives and pouring into folks. Of course, I'm running for prosecutor, and it's very important to me to incorporate into my platform tips and ideas and preferences and needs from people that are closest to this issue, that have been impacted, that have gone through unimaginable loss. What are you all looking for in a prosecutor? And do you think I'm that person?
Those 700 families deserve to know that their loved one matters. They matter. And I think that that's one of the things that I believe you're going to bring to the table, Melesa, is that I've worked with you now for 2 years. And I know you've gone to people's homes. I know you've cried with them. I know you've wrapped your arms around them. That's what I believe you can bring. And like I've said to you, my friend, my sister, to be honest, okay, is that if you keep that heart and you keep that soul, you will be successful. You will be able to take care of the people in our community. And I believe that, sweetheart. I really do.
Thank you so much.
You're welcome. Thank you. Now, what do you want to say?
All right, yeah. That's a hard act to follow, Mr. Bob.
How can I top that? How can I top that? That's all the emotional stuff, but the not the logical. To the people that are in there now, it feels like it's a job. It's their job to do that. But I think someone like you can bring that personal touch to it and say, okay, just like I said, you're upset, but this is how it's going to go, and this is why it goes there.
And doing that with empathy.
Exactly. Another thing I think is stricter sentencing laws. These people, they go in and they do their crimes, and they're out on the streets in a matter of years. When, like Shelley said earlier, we're still suffering. We're still going through it, and that's not right.
Well, I've got my calls to action. I've got my charges to action, and I just want to thank you both so much for just continuing on. Like I said, you all had every reason to just abandon society, but instead, you use everything that you have, your personal finances, your home, your experiences, your background, your relationship, your love between each other to change lives, to be the comfort in dark moments. And I can confidently say that Jackson County could use a lot more of you. So thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you.
Jackson County can use a lot more of you.
Miss Michelle. Thank you.